"Julian," he said coolly, his voice echoing off the mahogany shelves. "I've been expecting you." His tone was disarmingly cordial, yet laced with an undercurrent of menace that tightened the air around us. I clutched the papers to my chest, every fiber of my being screaming that the moment for confrontation had arrived. "Expecting me," I replied, forcing steadiness into my voice, despite the roaring tempest outside and the turbulent storm raging within me. "All these hidden truths, don't you want them to see the light? My name is Julian, the adopted son. Forever, the bright exception in a family defined by blood and legacy. Even among the ornate corridors of our ancestral home, echoing with the laughter and secrets of generations past, I have endured a persistent whispering doubt that perhaps I was never truly meant to belong. I remember the comfort of my childhood, the gentle hum of evening chatter over dinner, the reassuring presence of my adoptive parents, whose eyes shone with both love and hidden sorrow. They embraced me, yet shadows lingered in our smiles, reminders of a secret past and the fragile balance that held our family together. Despite all the luxury surrounding me, insecurity often gnawed at my core. I longed to be recognized as truly part of them, not merely an orphan rescued by fortune. Then, as if summoned by fate, or perhaps by the inexorable pull of a dark tide, Alexander arrived. One crisp autumn morning, just as the first golden rays filtered through the vast stained glass windows of our manor, the heavy front door swung open with a measured hesitation. I remember the figure stepping into the foyer, a man whose presence was as commanding as it was enigmatic. Alexander's eyes were cool and calculating, and his smile, though charming, held an unsettling promise. In that moment, the very fabric of my carefully ordered world began to unravel. At first, his arrival was shrouded in the polite veneer of reunion. The tension in the air was subtle, a barely noticeable undercurrent that I, in my growing unease, could feel in every polished surface and every hushed conversation. I found myself watching him closely, wondering what ghost of the past had returned to challenge the present. I could not shake off the feeling that Alexander was more than just a long-lost family member. He was an intrusion into the delicate mosaic of identity and belonging had struggled so hard to assemble over the years. It did not take long for his true nature to seep into our day-to-day interactions. I still recall the first time our eyes met in the quiet solitude of the Manor's library. I was savoring a moment of rare introspection when he approached, his footsteps echoing softly against the marble floor. His voice, low and measured, broke the silence as he inquired, "What are you thinking, Julian?" In that instant, time seemed to pause, and I was confronted not only by his piercing gaze, but by the stark reminder of my own vulnerability. I managed a feeble smile and replied, "Just not used to having another member in the family." His retort came swiftly and coldly. "Family? You think we're a family? You're just an orphan who got lucky, Julian. Don't forget that. Don't." His words stung like a lash, dredging up all the insecurities I had long tried to bury. In that charged moment, I felt the old ghosts stirring. The echo of past conversations, the hushed tones when we spoke of him as if he were a myth, flooded back. Our home, with its luxurious veneer and artful deceptions, suddenly felt less like a haven and more like a labyrinth of secrets. Whispers of betrayal, of greed, entangled with long-forgotten family scandals, resonated in every shadowed nook. I began to wonder if Alexander's return was the catalyst of a vendetta lurking in the depths of our lineage, a vendetta aimed not only at reclaiming what he believed was rightfully his, but also at toppling the carefully constructed life I knew. That dinner party, held in the sprawling dining hall with its crystal chandeliers and imposing portraits, was the first real tipping point of this new reality. As the family gathered, the conversations flowed with an air of rehearsed elegance. Yet beneath the pleasantries, every clink of the fine china carried the weight of unspoken pasts. When Alexander's voice cut through the murmur like a shard of ice, the party fell into a charged silence. I watched him closely, my mind churning with a blend of dread and defiance as he casually reminded everyone of my status. Each word he uttered was a calculated jab designed to expose the fissures in what we all believed was an unbreakable bond of loyalty and love. After the clamor of that fateful evening subsided, I retreated to one of the many quiet corners of the manor, a secluded study lined with ancient books and relics of a bygone era to gather my thoughts. The ornate clock on the mantel ticked steadily, a reminder that time, though measured in regal precision, here held secrets of its own. I pored over old photographs, one in particular, drawing my attention a sepia-toned image of my adoptive parents with a young boy whose smile was both enigmatic and elusive. It was as if I was looking at two different versions of the past, the one I knew and one I was only beginning to suspect existed. That night, lying awake in my lavish yet suddenly alien room, I felt the cold tendrils of paranoia entwine with my thoughts. Could it be that the life I was so sure of had been built on a foundation of lies? In the lonely hours before dawn, I recalled moments from the past, an offhand remark from a servant, a glance exchanged between my parents that hinted at concealed regrets, and the always disquieting feeling that our home, for all its splendor, was a vault of too many secrets. Every memory, every small detail of that day coalesced into a growing urgency within me. I had to know the truth. I began to wonder if Alexander's ploys were merely the tip of an iceberg, that I so far had only glimpsed the possibility that there might be a dark conspiracy at the heart of our family, an undercurrent of betrayal that could shatter the myth of our perfect existence. In the days that followed his arrival, I found myself increasingly isolated. My once unwavering confidence was now clouded by suspicion and anxiety. I engaged in half-whispered conversations with our longtime maid, who, with eyes that seemed to know too much, offered little more than sorrowful glances. The family lawyer, ever the somber facilitator of our affairs, provided cryptic reassurances that failed to quell my mounting doubts. Even my closest friend, whose loyalty had always been a comforting constant, seemed uncharacteristically evasive when I broached the subject of Alexandra's true identity. Yet, despite the oppressive atmosphere, a small ember of defiance ignited within me. I resolved to unravel the layers of deceit woven into the fabric of my family history. Every furtive conversation in the shadowed corridors, every whispered secret between family members became a clue in the puzzle I must solve. Was Alexander truly the biological child as his lineage claimed, or was he a masterful impostor orchestrating his return to exact revenge on a family that had hidden its darkest truths from me all along? Standing at the precipice of what felt like an irreversible change, I realized that every graceful facade in our mansion now concealed a potential trapdoor, a gateway leading to hidden rooms of raw emotion and bitter betrayal. My every step was measured and cautious as I navigated not only the labyrinthine halls of our ancestral home, but also the equally treacherous corridors of my own heart and mind. With each passing day, the facade of peace crumbled further, exposing a raw and tumultuous undercurrent that would force me to confront long-suppressed truths about who I was and what I truly belonged to. As the twilight deepened into a brooding night, I stood before a large, ornate mirror in my study. The reflection that gazed back at me was not just that of an adopted son in a luxurious manor, but of someone poised on the threshold of a dramatic reckoning. I felt an unyielding pull to dig deeper, to force open the sealed vault of my family's legacy and expose the secrets that lay hidden behind every gilded door. Even as dread and determination battled within me, one question loomed large. Could I, in my quest for truth, forever damage the very people I had come to love? In that charged moment of self-reflection, I made a silent vow, one that would define the course of my life. I would no longer allow the shadows of the past to dictate my future. I would seek out every hidden fragment of our family's secrets, confront Alexander and anyone else who dared to challenge the fragile bonds of loyalty and identity. At the heart of it all lay a tangled web of betrayal and revenge, and I was determined to untangle it no matter the cost. Thus, as dawn's first light attempted to penetrate the darkness outside, I stepped away from the mirror with a heavy heart and resolute spirit. My story was just beginning, and with Alexander's enigmatic presence casting a long shadow over everything I cherished, I knew that the coming days would test every ounce of my strength, courage, and faith in what we call family. I no longer knew if love or betrayal would win out, but one thing was certain: the truth was waiting to be found, and I was ready to pursue it, even if it meant unraveling everything I had ever known. The echoes of that fateful night still reverberate in my mind as I stand at the crossroads of past and future, grappling with the ultimate question: can I still embrace a future bathed in truth, or will the dark secrets of our lineage forever bind me to a destiny I never chose? I spent sleepless nights wandering the shadowed corridors of our sprawling manor, determined to piece together the truth that had so long eluded me. Every silken drape and every carved panel whispered secrets from a past I was desperate to decode. In the hush of midnight, while the family slept in their gilded chambers, I made my way to a forgotten wing of the house, a dusty archive of papers, diaries, and faded photographs. The air was heavy with the musk of aged paper and secrets best left buried. Yet I could not turn back. I needed to know who Alexander truly was, and I was convinced that somewhere amid these relics lay the evidence to shatter his carefully woven facade. I began with the diaries of my adoptive parents' volumes, so meticulously kept they could have been confessions as much as records. Between the faint trembling lines of elegant handwriting, I discovered ambiguous passages hinting at a secret so gargantuan it had been locked away from prying eyes. One entry, more cryptic than the rest, mentioned a boy who was never meant to return, and an identity forged in the crucible of revenge. The words hit me like a blow. Had they known of Alexander's true nature all along? Every line of that diary sent a prickling cascade of questions down my spine. Over the next few days, I pursued clandestine conversations with those who had seen the family at its most vulnerable. The longtime maid, who had seen the house transform from a haven of light to a den of whispered regrets, confided in hushed tones that Alexander's arrival had stirred memories best kept hidden. "There are things this house will never forgive," she murmured one rainy afternoon as we stood before an ancient portrait, her eyes welling with passions she dared not unleash in public. Even the family lawyer, normally a bastion of stoic professionalism, left me with warnings shrouded in half-truths. His words, laced with regret, hinted that some secrets once uncovered bring more ruin than redemption. Each piece of information formed a sordid mosaic. Alexandra's impeccable manners and suave demeanor concealed a hunger for something beyond mere inheritance, a hunger for retribution directed at the very soul of our family. I began to suspect that the boy who had stormed into our lives was nothing more than an impostor, a dangerous charlatan whose intentions were to dismantle the carefully preserved legacy of love and loyalty. Every discreet conversation pointed towards a conspiracy, a misguided vendetta to tear apart our world of opulence with the raw, unyielding force of betrayal. The turning point came on a storm-laden evening when thunder drummed a relentless rhythm against the ancient stone walls, as if nature itself was venting its fury at the unfolding drama within our home. I had been poring over another set of cryptic notes left by my parents in a concealed drawer when Alexander suddenly appeared in the dim light of the study. His silhouette, framed by lightning flashes slicing through the curtains, looked every bit the specter of retribution. His eyes shimmered with a dangerous blend of sorrow and defiance, an expression that chilled me more than the storm ever could. "Julian," he said coolly, his voice echoing off the mahogany shelves, "I've been expecting you." His tone was disarmingly cordial, yet laced with an undercurrent of menace that tightened the air around us. I clutched the papers to my chest, every fiber of my being screaming that the moment for confrontation had arrived. "Expecting me," I replied, forcing steadiness into my voice despite the roaring tempest outside, and the turbulent storm raging within me. All these hidden truths, don't you want them to see the light? A short, bitter laugh escaped him. Light. You mean the lies that have kept this family whole, or the darkness we've so desperately tried to hide? His words reverberated in the cavernous space, each one a blow delivered with calculated precision. I came back to reclaim what was stolen from me, the truth, and with it, a debt that needed to be paid. The paper in my hand trembled as I revealed what I had discovered, the diary entries, the evidence that spoke of a conspiracy so deep that it threatened to undermine every foundation of our lineage. You're not who you claim to be, I said, eyes burning with determination. Your arrival was a ploy, a ruse meant to shatter our carefully constructed facade. For a long, agonizing moment, Alexander's face remained inscrutable, the flickering lamplight casting torn shadows across his features. Then his eyes flashed with an intensity that bordered on anguish. You think you've unraveled everything, he asked softly. You believe yourself the arbiter of truth, but you have no idea of the storms that have forged me. My voice, though tense, betrayed a note of disbelief. Then who are you, Alexander? Why have you infiltrated our lives as if you were always meant to be here? Explain the discrepancies, the documents that don't match your story. The diary that warns of an imposter were my parents trying to protect me from you. He stepped closer, the storm outside a mirror to the turbulence in his eyes. I'm the embodiment of every wound that this family inflicted. I was not born from the same blood. They faked my lineage to conceal the truth of their misdemeanors. I was raised by those who had been wronged, groomed to invade the fortress of your adoptive home and make you pay for a sin you could never comprehend. His voice broke slightly, a rare glimpse of vulnerability that made his hostility all the more piercing. The silence that followed was laden with unspoken anguish. I felt repulsed and oddly sympathetic in equal measure. All my life I had wrestled with the notion of not belonging, and here was a man who had wrestled with abandonment and a vindictive need to expose the rot beneath our polished veneer. Yet his methods to unravel family ties with malicious intent were not a path I could walk beside him. Who are your real parents? Then, I demanded, my throat dry with a mix of fury and heartbreak. If you were not one of us by blood, what right do you have to disrupt everything I hold dear? Alexander's eyes glistened under the flickering light, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the boy who once had been lost to me, only to return cloaked in bitterness. I never sought your approval, Julian. I was thrust into a destiny defined by vengeance, a destiny that demanded I tear down the lies, even if it meant ripping our lives apart. I infiltrated this family not as a biological son, but as an avenger. My true identity was never meant to surface, for it would shatter the world they built on deceit. His words gnawed at me. The implications were staggering. My adoptive parents had engineered a web of lies to preserve their power and reputation, and here stood a man long conditioned to exact a revenge born of lies and betrayal. I realized then that the truth was not as black and white as I had assumed. It was twisted and tangled in the lies of those who claimed to be family. The man who now sought retribution might indeed be a victim of circumstances as tragic as my own, caught between the duty of his upbringing and the desire to expose a truth that none dared speak. Before I could respond, a crash of thunder heralded the arrival of my adoptive parents in the doorway. Their expressions were a mix of anguish and resignation, as though they had anticipated this moment all along. My mother's eyes pleaded for understanding, while my father's gaze hardened with regret and resolve. Julian Alexander, this ends now. My father declared, his voice wavering between authority and sorrow. You both harbor wounds that cannot be healed by vengeance. Our past is marred by errors and secrets, but tearing the family apart will solve nothing. My mother added softly, we made our choices in the hope of preserving something precious, a family's unity, even if it was built on the shifting sands of our history. Her words cut through the tension like a knife, stirring emotions I had long kept suppressed. Alexander's stance faltered for a brief beat, his hardened expression momentarily softening into something akin to regret. "You never could forgive, could you?" he murmured, his voice barely audible over the storm. "But maybe it's too late for forgiveness on either side." In that charged moment, I was torn between the unyielding pull of duty to our family and the realization that truth, no matter how painful, must be unshackled from the bonds of deceit. "What now?" I demanded, my voice echoing the conflict that roiled within me. "Do we allow the past to dictate our future, or do we step into the light, even if it burns us?" The silence that followed was as heavy as the storm outside. My parents exchanged sorrowful glances, while Alexander and I stood at the crossroads of a destiny that had been carved out by secrets and regrets. I realized that every step we had taken in this labyrinth of betrayal had led us here to a moment of reckoning where forgiveness and retribution competed for dominion over our hearts. Alexander looked at me with a strange mixture of defiance and pleading, as if expecting me to be the arbiter of not just his fate, but the fate of our fractured family. "Julian," he said, voice softening for the first time, "I never wanted to be the enemy. I only wanted to reclaim the truth that was stolen from me, a truth that in my eyes belongs to all of us." I shuddered with a profound understanding that revealing the truth, no matter how devastating, might finally free us from the chains of the past. "Perhaps," I whispered, "if we all face what we have hidden away, we might find a way to heal." Yet even as those words left my lips, I wondered whether forgiveness was possible when the very foundation of our lives had been built on such intricate deceptions. And so, as the storm outside began to ease, leaving behind a silence heavy with promise and uncertainty, I felt the weight of our shared destiny settle upon us. I knew that the journey ahead would be fraught with painful revelations and difficult choices. Choices that would require each of us to confront the darkest recesses of our hearts. In that moment, I vowed to seek the truth, not out of a desire for revenge, but in the hope that exposing our hidden wounds might be the first step toward genuine reconciliation. The night's revelations left me trembling at the precipice of an unknown future, caught between the love that once defined our family and the bitter betrayal that threatened to destroy it. I understood now that forgiveness might be the only path to redemption, that only by confronting our demons could we dare to hope for a healing that transcended blood and lies. As the first hints of dawn crept over the horizon, I resolved to embrace this painful journey, determined to unearth the truth, no matter the cost, and perhaps, in time, to finally mend the fractures that had so long defined us. In that fragile stillness, with every heartbeat echoing the agony and hope of the night, I felt both broken and reborn, aware that the coming days would demand courage beyond measure. My story. Our story was far from over. The family I once knew was crumbling, but in its ruins lay the possibility of a future built on honesty, however painful the truth might be. And as I prepared to step forward into the uncertain light of a new day, I clutched onto that hope even as the echoes of betrayal reminded me that every secret unveiled comes at a price. I woke early that morning with a heavy heart and a mind still churning from the previous night's tumultuous revelations. The storm had subsided, leaving our manor cloaked in a fragile calm, as if holding its breath in anticipation of fate's next move. I knew that the fragile veneer of our family's unity was about to shatter completely. Determined to unearth every hidden truth, I retreated to the quiet solitude of the manor's library, a room I had come to know as both refuge and graveyard for long-buried secrets. Rifling through a forgotten corner of our family archives, I discovered a leather-bound envelope tucked behind a portrait of an ancestor whose eyes had witnessed decades of turmoil. My pulse quickened as I slid my trembling fingers under the seal and unfolded a series of documents, a series of birth certificates, notarized registrations, and correspondence that spanned years of silence. As I pored over the faded ink, a singular truth emerged. The man publicly known as Alexander was no lost heir born of our family's lineage. Instead, these documents revealed a calculated fabrication. He was not the biological son my parents had once longed for. He was a pawn, a ghost meticulously conjured by an enemy of our family as part of a sinister scheme to exact revenge for old transgressions. In that moment, my world tilted on its axis. Every whispered rumor, every accusation from last night suddenly found context in the cold, hard certainty of paper. Armed with this irrefutable evidence, I resolved that the final confrontation could no longer be delayed. I tracked Alexander down to the study where the rain had left rivulets of memory on the polished floor. Each droplet a silent testimony to the night's past. The room was charged with the residual tension of our earlier exchange, every shadow and beam of light attesting to the secrets tucked away within these walls. I found him seated at the edge of an antique desk, his eyes distant, as if already burdened by the weight of the inevitable verdict. "Alexander Vs," began, my voice steady but laced with raw determination. "I have found what we all tried so desperately to hide." I laid the documents before him on the polished wood. "These prove your origins are not intertwined with our family at all. You are not our lost son. You're an impostor, a mirage conjured for a purpose far darker than simple revenge." A long silence followed as his gaze fell on the documents. For a moment, the defiant hardness in his eyes wavered, replaced by a flicker of something I hadn't seen before: vulnerability. His voice, when it came, was a tremulous whisper. "You think this reveals everything?" He looked up at me, anguish and defiance intermingling. "How can you stand there and condemn me when I was never given the chance to be loved, to rise above the legacy of rejection that was forced upon me? I was raised on the bitter ashes of a promise broken, a promise that once held the hope of belonging." Before I could respond, the heavy oak doors burst open, and my adoptive parents appeared in the doorway, their faces etched with sorrow and reluctant resignation. My father's voice, measured yet laden with regret, filled the room. "Julian, it appears our carefully constructed lives have finally unraveled. We have guarded these secrets believing that silence was our only shield, but now the truth demands its due." My mother's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she stepped closer, her voice quivering with both anger and sorrow. "We thought we were protecting you all, but in doing so, we allowed deception to breed revenge." Alexander's lips trembled as he absorbed their words, his earlier hostility dissolving into a cascade of shattered emotions. "I was told that my existence was a mistake, a betrayal that needed to be corrected, that my very being was engineered to disrupt your perfect world," he confessed, his tone laden with bitterness and regret. "Yet all I ever longed for was genuine love, a place to belong. Instead, I became a tool of vengeance." His gaze met mine, searching for a hint of empathy that I wasn't sure I could offer. In that moment, as if the weight of our confessions bore down on the very foundations of the study, a deafening crash reverberated through the room. The antique bookshelf that had stood for generations, laden with the history of our family, buckled under the pressure of a latent structural weakness, and with a terrifying lurch, it began to topple toward us. My heart seized in my chest as I shouted a warning. In the chaotic scramble that ensued, I lunged forward, my hand outstretched to intercept the falling mass of wood and old leather-bound volumes. The accident unfolded in slow motion, dust motes dancing in the frenzied light. The anguished cry of a shattered relic, and then a heavy thud as the shelf slammed into the floor, scattering generations of memories. In the disarray, time seemed to pause. My father staggered backward, clutching his side, as pain etched his features, while my mother cried out in horror. Alexander, for a fleeting moment, dropped his facade and crumpled to the floor, a pained groan escaping him. I rushed to his side, my earlier anger replaced by a desperate urgency to tend to the chaos of human frailty. "Alexander, stay with me," I pleaded, as I tried to staunch the bleeding from a gash on his forehead, my hands trembling as I pressed them against the wound. The violent interruption forced us to confront an undeniable truth. Our lives were as fragile as the ancient building that had sheltered our secrets. In the stunned silence that followed the accident, we all slowly gathered our senses. Amid the chaos of falling debris and the echo of shattered remnants of our shared past, I realized that our bitter desire for revenge and the labyrinth of hidden lies had nearly cost us everything, our very lives. Alexander's eyes fluttered open, and for the first time I saw genuine remorse shining in their depths. "I never meant for it to come to this," he managed, his voice hoarse. "I wanted to reclaim my place, to force the truth into the light. But I see now the cost of a vendetta built on lies. I only ever wanted to be seen, to be heard." His words, fragile and sincere, hung in the charged air. My parents, leaning together for support, exchanged a glance that conveyed years of pent-up anguish. "We have all paid a price for our secrets," my mother whispered. "The cost of silence is far greater than the burden of truth." My father nodded slowly, his voice strained but resolute. "We must find a way to mend what has been broken, but first we must confront our past and forgive, even if forgiveness brings pain." In that crucible of calamity, I stood at the precipice of an irrevocable choice. The documents that had once symbolized betrayal now served as a mirror, reflecting not only our sins, but also our potential for redemption. I looked at Alexandra with his battered pride and trembling vulnerability, and then at my adoptive parents, whose contrite eyes pleaded for understanding. A surge of conflicting emotions roiled within me. The searing betrayal of a man I had once seen as an interloper, the enduring warmth of a family that, despite its flaws, had shared in my upbringing, and the crushing realization that the truth, no matter how painful, was the only path forward if we were ever to heal. Alexander first said gently, rising to my feet with unwavering resolve, "I cannot erase what has happened. I cannot undo the hurt that has been inflicted. But perhaps, if we all have the courage, we can begin to rebuild from the ruins of our past. I choose to forgive, not because I forget the pain, but because I believe that living in the web of these lies will only chain us to a destiny of perpetual sorrow." His eyes shimmered with tears as he nodded slowly. "Then, let this be the beginning of atonement," he whispered in a voice that trembled with both remorse and hope. "I will seek to make amends, to find a path that leads away from vengeance and toward redemption, even if I must wander that path alone at first." My adoptive parents looked at me, their expressions a mixture of sorrow, gratitude, and tentative hope. "We have hidden the truth out of fear," my father admitted, his voice breaking. "But fear only breeds more fear. It is time for us to face our mistakes and learn the value of truth, however painful it may be." As I sat in the quiet of the study later that evening, the echoes of the day's revelations mingling with the soft hum of the cooling night, I wondered if any of us could ever truly escape the weight of our past. Yet, as I held onto the fragile hope of forgiveness and the promise of honest reconciliation, I realized that perhaps the most profound kind of strength lies not in holding on to old wounds, but in daring to mend them even if the outcome remains uncertain.